And this is the first of this semester's Research Success Series. These are workshops we do in collaboration with the Faculty Research Development Office, and we very much appreciate their partnership. And today we're going to think about different ways to plan and think about sabbaticals and other ways to create time for your research. And to make the best use of our time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Barbara Rodriguez. I very much appreciate Barbara agreeing to moderate, and the panelists, and all of you for being here.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to extend my gratitude to Advance at UNM for all the work that they continue to do to support faculty across campus and at the branch campuses as well. So thank you, Julia, for everything that you do. And our panelists particularly, thank you for taking time out of a Friday afternoon to share your ideas with us. What I'd like to do is I will start off with introductions of the panelists, and then I will launch into asking the panelists a series of questions. I will also present a brief set of PowerPoint slides that details the process for applying for a sabbatical. And Julia will be monitoring the chat box, so please feel free to drop into the chat box any question that might come up. We will also have Q&A toward the tail end of today's session. So without further ado, I'm going to begin by introducing today's panelists. I will start with Tamar Janisar. She is a professor of communication and journalism. She is a health communication scholar whose work focuses on the role of communication in reducing health disparities and supporting multi-level behavior change at the individual, organizational, and community levels. I also like to welcome Rosa Vallejos, who is an associate professor of linguistics. Her research is centered in Amazonia. She studies 3 typologically distinct languages and focuses on morphosyntax, language content, and documentary fieldwork. Helen Wearing is also here with us this afternoon, and Helen is a professor of biology and math and statistics. Her research is focused on understanding what drives the temporal and spatial patterns observed in ecological and epidemiological data. And last but not least is Hannah Torres. She is the director of the Faculty Research Development Office that's housed within the Office of the Vice President for Research. Hannah works in close collaboration with units within the Office of the Vice President for Research and research administration personnel in colleges and departments to enable faculty to obtain external funding. Her office also assists with the implementation of campus-wide research initiatives. So welcome, panelists, and thank you again for agreeing to share your experiences and ideas with all of us this afternoon. So I'll begin with posing a few questions for the panel, and Julia will be watching out for additional questions along the way. So I'll start by asking Tamar and Helen and Rosa to tell us about your approach to planning your sabbatical and describing your sabbatical experience. I'll start with Tamar.
Sure, thank you. I want to say that I always had a dream to have a sabbatical in another country, but I didn't choose my partner according to this dream. So for family reason, it was not possible for me to go out of town for my sabbatical. So when I was planning the sabbatical, my goal was really to really finalize a lot of projects that I had accumulated data over the year and loved them, but never got to finalize the articles. And in my case, I took a year off, which is a decision I can talk about a little bit later. The main reason I took a year off is I thought that I needed that time to publish. So in terms of planning, for me, it's really about the time. So for me, it's about planning, when am I going to write? And might not be the best way to plan the project, but I was just like working very in a very disciplined manner at the certain hours that I planned at the time, and I looked into that more than how many articles I was actually getting out the door. So this ability to have a year of at least work uninterrupted time almost was really precious and really helped my well-being, I would say, not just my career.
Thank you, Tamara. Rosa, tell us about your approach to planning your sabbatical and tell us a bit about your sabbatical experience. And it looks like your microphone is off, muted.
Okay, is that okay now? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Well, I took a year-long sabbatical in 2018-2019, that academic year. And my research is focused, as you mentioned, in the Amazon and entails fieldwork. It's a very important component, right? And fieldwork in indigenous communities. And at the time that I took my sabbatical, I was adding another kind of layer to my research. At that moment, I was working mostly with 2 languages, and I wanted to extend my research to a new language. And so my goal for the sabbatical was to do more like intensive fieldwork in these communities, to be able to build a corpus for this language, which is crucial for linguistic research. And so I plan in my sabbatical in 2 moments, have more or less half, the first half focused on fieldwork in the Amazon, going to these remote locations, and invest actually in more like the long-term outcomes of research, which is building relationships with the communities, training collaborators, starting to collect data, and mainly enter raw data. And then the second half, I wanted to be focused on more like the analysis of the data, processing of the data, and writing. And so this is how I planned. The first half was fieldwork and in the Amazon. And for the other half, I went to a research lab in Lyon in France. And I can tell you more details on how that I was able to pull that off, right? Because of you need significant funding for those 2 types of activities in research. Overall, I think it was a success. Of course, speaking, everything worked differently before COVID, right? That's what happened. And in terms of being able to do this away from Albuquerque, is because I have a son, but my son is already a grown up. He's in grad school by now. So those troubles that, you know, I understand moms have with little kids, I had those when I was in grad school. So those were the tough years for me. You know, I have other challenges now, but with adult kids, but those are different. So I can travel now better. So I can elaborate more on these points later on, okay?
Okay, very good. Thank you, Rosa. Helen, tell us about your planning, your approach to planning the sabbatical and your experience.
Yeah, so I was due for my sabbatical. I was eligible for my sabbatical in the year 2020, 2021, which is the year of the pandemic. And I actually had started planning for it out in fall 2019 before we knew anything about COVID. And my plan at the time was to spend 1 semester. I didn't have the funding or the sort of financial means to take the whole year. Spend the spring of 2021, part of it in the UK, maybe for two months. I come from the UK originally, but I also had a bunch of colleagues that I wanted to go spend time with in central Scotland. And so I'd already put feelers out to them, and we'd already found some possibilities for funding my accommodation, for instance. And then spring 2020 and the pandemic hit, and I had to decide whether I was still going to take my sabbatical in spring 2021 because I had to apply for it in the fall. And I decided to forge ahead just because by the time it got to the end of summer 2020, I sensed that I would need the break. And so I did. So I applied for it. I took it in spring 2021. And it was largely a stay-at-home experience because of the pandemic. And I wasn't able to get back to the UK that semester either. So I really focused a little bit kind of how Tamar was thinking about hers. Like, I really prioritized projects that had kind of got traction on, but I really needed to spend time finishing and completing and devoting uninterrupted sort of writing and research on. And I also devoted time to helping some of my students who are really struggling and getting them out the door, getting them finished with their graduate degrees as well. So for me, it was, it really helped my sort of get some of my projects further along, but it was also very much a mental health recuperation and taking time to recharge.
Mm-hmm. There is an aspect about the time to focus on your work, its relationship to mental health as we're trying to juggle all of these things, especially now during the pandemic. So thank you so much for describing your experiences and the plan that you use to approach the sabbatical leave. The next question, I'm going to follow up on something that Rosa raised and ask Hannah to help us think about funding. Because in order to go to the Amazon and France and potentially the UK, funding is essential. So Hannah, can you share with us ideas about how to go about funding a sabbatical? And what do you recommend people to what do you recommend to faculty who'd like to find the sabbatical funding?
Sure, thank you. My biggest recommendation that I want to put out there today is to reach out to the team at the Faculty Research Development Office. I think people tend to know us best for our role in helping main campus faculty get funding proposal elements together and prepared, but I personally would love to see more people connecting with us to talk about research idea development and opportunity scoping. We would be very happy to have those kinds of conversations and look at all different kinds of opportunities to fund something like a sabbatical or to find funding that can help to support making time for research. Our office has been increasing in capacity since I started with UNM in August, and we would love to be able to connect with you to learn about your research goals and to help you figure out ways to achieve those goals. So the best way to reach out to us is to submit a ticket through, we have a ticketing system online, and I can throw the link into the chat right now. But you can also always feel free to send us an email at frdo@unm.edu, and I'll throw that in the chat as well.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Rosa, how did you go about finding funding to head out and do your field work in the Amazon and to travel to France? Tell us a bit about that.
Sure. What I did is I looked for support for these two components independently of each other. And so for fieldwork, I try to identify specific programs that has NSF, NEH, and that support, different types of periods of work. And I identified three under NEH. One is the awards for faculty at Hispanic serving institutions, and I was researching on that one. And the other one was the summer stipend, NEH as well, summer stipend that gives, I believe at that time, $6,000 per month for 2 months. So that's something that you can do something about. And then there's another one that's more specific to my field, which is the NEH-NSF partnership for documenting endangered languages fellowship. That gives you, I think it continues to give the same amount, $5,400 per month for 12 months. So that's a year fellowship. So I was ready to apply for these three. And then I noticed that the first one was quite wide and open, and the competition probably will be very difficult, the one on Hispanic serving institutions. So I decided to focus on just two that are more kind of narrow, and I can, invest more time in preparing good applications. So I did send, just so you know, there's always a call from UNM first, because this is an internal competition first. And then I believe there's two proposals that are selected and then submitted to NEH, right? And so I submitted both at the same time, the fellowship and the summer stipend. And they were successful, but the first one I have to decline to be able to take the second one, the fellowship. And so that was successful. As I said, I spent quite a good amount of time preparing this to be basically putting almost all my eggs into this basket. And I work with the friends and colleagues. We read each other's stuff, and my chair, she's amazing, Jill Morford, if you don't know, giving your feedback, reading your proposals, and that was really helpful for that part. And for the second part, I reached to some other colleagues and friends, networks, to find research labs. And I did a postdoc in Europe, in Lyon, actually, in France. And so I knew of the existence of several research labs in Europe already. And there is a really good network of labs throughout Europe. And I can perhaps just share the link with you. This is the main one, the NETIAS, the Network of European Indigenous Institutes for Advanced Studies. And under this network, there are the list of institutes for advanced research per country. And so you can submit applications through the European Union as a large, or for specific country, specific labs. So those are very, very good and very generous. They usually give you for long term 10 months or 5 months. So I was dying to go for 10 months, but since I needed to go to the field to do field work, so I took a short period, just 5 months period in France. So the application for that one, I started to send applications in 2017 for my sabbatical in 2018-19. And some of them, as you know, NEH takes a few months. And in Europe, they were, at least in this lab, were quite quick. I sent applications around September 2017. By December, I knew already the outcome. So that's good, so that you can plan more quicker, right? And there's another one that I want to point out to you. Just so you let me share with you. This is the one of the centers listed under the first link that I sent you. But like this is the Collegium of Lyon. Like this Collegium of Lyon, there's others like Paris, Montpellier. What's the other one? There's at least 3 important ones in France, but there's in other countries as well. Another important one, and more for the social science and humanities, is this one in the Netherlands. I wanted to point you. There's the third link. That takes longer to give you the result, the outcome. So basically, you have to send your application earlier and to know. So these are just a few links that I want you to be aware of. And if you take a peek of the fellows in these centers, they are a wide range of fields and from a wide range of universities from around the world, and it's a really nice experience. So that's how I was able to find my sabbatical fieldwork and the research portion.
That's terrific. Congratulations on all of that, Rosa. 5 months in France sounds lovely.
10 even better.
10 even, I'll take 5. I would take 5. All right, so Helen and Tamar, I have a question for both of you. You all did stay at home. You weren't in France or the Amazon. So did you have an approach to help you make effective use of your time? Knowing myself, if I were at home, I could see myself getting a little off track. Did you set a schedule or did you meet with a colleague? How did you approach this? I'll start with Helen and then go to Tamar. Helen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first of all, I actually completely reconfigured a room in my house just so that I could sort of look out of one of my windows and see the outside and have a really different sort of environment than I was used to. But I like a mixture of scheduled and unscheduled time. So I like to have just unscheduled. I had a couple of days which are completely unscheduled where I could choose to spend it doing whatever I wanted to. That was my treat. And then I would have other days which were a scheduled time. And I had a really awesome colleague that I've worked with for a long time. And we would meet every Monday morning at 10 a.m. my time to sort of set off the week. And we would we were at the time, we were writing a grant proposal and working on other projects, but that really helped sort of kickstart my week. And she wasn't on sabbatical at the time, so I was very grateful for her. And I also, during this time, because I was at home and not able to travel, I decided to still keep my weekly lab meeting with my students. So I had a virtual Zoom lab meeting, and that was always Friday afternoon. So that would finish off the week, which I like that social interaction. And I would also periodically meet with my students as well. So like at specific times, and that helps schedule time as well. So it was a mix of scheduled and unscheduled time. But yes, I was stuck in a room in my house for that entire time. So.
And
Yeah.
was your colleague here at UNM or at another institution?
No, my colleague was at Louisiana State University. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Tamara, how did you approach it?
So in many ways, it was very similar to Helen. Whether it was strategic or not, I'm definitely a person that is more accountable to others than to themselves. And I really wish I made a different decision, but I prioritized certain projects that I had with other authors for that reason. I think what Helen did, which is having a writing buddy, is also a really good idea. So for me, really, I'm not necessarily a disciplined structure person, but having the structure when I was on sabbatical really helped me. And part of it was not working. So part of it was, I'm going to go to the gym now, and then after I do my class, which I wouldn't do during Omicron, then I will have the time for writing, and then I will put down the virtual pen and I'll do other things. The other thing that I have to say that I only thought about when I was talking earlier to Julia was that I think for those of us who have families, our families are also paying price when we pay price, right? When we're busy, they're also paying a price. And looking at a sabbatical, whether it's a semester or more, as also time to reconnect with your families, your friends, your pets, yourself, I think is also really important. I don't know how conscious I was of it at the time that I took the sabbatical, but when I look at it, it's been a few years, it's been 4 years since I took the sabbatical. When I look at it now, I think it's only fair, right? That we try to reconnect. And even if it's reconnecting with yourself, I think that's really important. So it's not something you write in the official plans that you have, but maybe we should, right? Maybe UNM should ask us to write that as part of our plan, is how we're going to reconnect with other aspects of our life that are not just work. So I think considering all of this is really important.
That's an interesting idea, Tamar. And it's not until we stop that we recognize how disconnected or how challenged we are with respect to time to keep those connections going. And the sabbatical time gives you that opportunity to reflect. So thank you for sharing that. That's a really interesting idea to think about asking about that on the application. Interesting. All right, so Tamar kind of alluded to the application process, and in the application itself, a candidate for sabbatical leave outlines what they hope to accomplish during the sabbatical time period. So I'm going to ask each of you, Rosa, Tamar, and Helen, what did you accomplish compared to what you planned? I'll start with Rosa.
Well, I reread my last night to remind myself what I promised. And as always, I've overpromised. I don't know why do we do that. I don't think nobody was telling me, add one more line, add one more paper, add one more project. I do this to myself all the time. I did accomplish a few things, but not all what I promised there. And in fact, I mentioned one paper. I said, oh, this is already ongoing. I have a draft. The draft continues to be draft until now, sadly to say. But I did write a couple of other things. One thing that I did accomplish, which I didn't develop in the sabbatical per se, to the document that I wrote for the university, is in setting up, building this really strong long-term relationship with the community that I work with. I didn't elaborate on that in my application, and that should be there somewhere because that takes time. That's an investment on our part, right? Or with my collaborators. And so I did achieve that, and that before knowing about COVID, and that served me well, great in this time, because I have to do a lot of things to the distance, right? So by being there for several months, I interacted with them, I was invested in my future for COVID times without knowing. That's basically my point. And that's not in the plan that I wrote, and that's not in the report that I wrote. Okay? That's just what I say.
And that accomplishment will serve you well for a very long time.
Yeah.
Important to make those connections. Helen, what did you accomplish compared to what you planned?
I mean, I agree with Rose that I think most of us always overpromise what we're going to do or have higher expectations than what turns out. But I think that's completely normal, and I don't think people should stress too much about that. I definitely, so there are things that I was able to complete. I had the grant application that I was working on, we submitted, we didn't get, but where I was able to put work into another application, I was able to work on some papers, but I wasn't able to complete certain things, and I worked on different things as well. So I just adapted to what was the things that were achievable and that people could spend time on with me, my collaborations in particular, and then other things I could do on my own. So I would probably say maybe a third of what I was trying to do, I kind of did something close to that. Yeah.
And that's perfectly fine.
Yes, and I would also just like to, Tamar's point about when we write these applications, it's all focused on, promising these sort of academic products like papers or books or, and I really do think that actually the most important part of my sabbatical was the time I took out to recharge and like not have that schedule of teaching and service on my plate all the time. And so I think actually formalizing that and acknowledging that that's part of the reason why people should take sabbaticals, I think would be a really helpful thing for UNM. Yeah.
Excellent. Tamar, what did you accomplish compared to what you planned? Is a similar theme here?
Yeah, I think it's very similar. I think overall I did. So if you remember, I didn't have like, I don't know what I put in the application, and I did not want to look at it, but when I know what I said to myself, right? I didn't have a number. I didn't say, okay, I want X number of articles necessarily. For me, it was about just being disciplined about writing. So in that regard, it was fine, right? I was never as much as you wish, right? But I was disciplined. I did write. I did progress thing. I don't know if you look at my CV, you necessarily can tell, oh yeah, the following year you had more publications. I don't know if it's like that, but I can definitely say that it did impact my productivity for at least 3 years later. Just the ability to really focus on writing, to allow yourself to focus on writing and to acknowledge that this is your first priority. That was really important. In my field, we don't have necessarily a book to write. It's more about articles. But I think the equivalent, I think it would be easier in fields where you are expected to write your own books. Then you should expect yourself probably, if you take a year like I did, you should expect yourself to have most of the book done, but probably not all of it, right? And if you take a semester, then it's half of that. So I don't think we should have very big expectations in terms of publishing. We all know that it takes a lot of time, and there are some aspects of it that are not even under our control, right? Like reviewers. So I don't think we should start it with career-changing expectation necessarily, but I will say that yes, it did help me. I mean, I did accomplish things that I couldn't have accomplished if I didn't take it. I don't know for me that it was necessarily the difference between a year and one semester. I might have been able to do something not that different over a semester. But yeah, it made a difference. I don't think it's necessarily a number game for a sabbatical.
And I don't think I really appreciate your perspectives, because on my end, I receive the reports of the sabbatical leave from each of the faculty, and I don't want faculty to be apologetic for what they didn't accomplish, because I think that their application materials set forth a plan, not just for the sabbatical period, but as you all have suggested, for many years to come. So as I read the reports and I respond to the faculty, I am always so pleased with what they have accomplished. So taking a very positive approach to the focus time that they have. So with that in mind, I'd like to kind of expand on some of the notions that you have introduced, and that is there's some positive outcomes as a result of the sabbatical that aren't necessarily the products that we look for in higher ed academia. Looking back, what are some of the additional positive outcomes that you didn't expect? Rosa, what comes to mind for you?
Sure. For me, it could be, I already mentioned this, the fact that I was able to build these connections in the community, strong relationships with them, identify a few key people, partner, collaborators, and and they've been in touch with me. We've continued to be in touch throughout all these difficult times. And to some extent, I became kind of the liaison to certain areas in Peru, outside the communities, outside the villages. For better or for worse, that comes with responsibilities as well. So I'm ready to take on that job as well. And but the cool thing is that I was able to complete at least one key paper that I needed to submit, and I needed a specific type of data that I couldn't find in Mexico. I couldn't find, and I made an attempt to say to ask these questions to a couple of days. They responded me through WhatsApp. They started because at the time that I started work with them, there were no internet connectivity, anything. And they suddenly became my friends, and we are part of a group in WhatsApp. And since then, I've been conducting online research, even set up a project, running some subjects with video stimuli through WhatsApp. That's been amazing. Of course, I set up the meetings, but I don't know when they're gonna respond, because it has to be like good sunlight for recharge the batteries. They don't have to be rain, all those things when they but I'm connected with them instead of me waiting to go back to the field. It's been 2 years since I haven't been able to go. So that's been amazing. So I didn't plan that way. Nobody planned that way for what happened to us. And then in Europe, the good thing was that I grew my network of collaborators and friends and such, and a couple of projects came about after that. I was invited to do, some authorship, some things like that, organize an event together. That's usually a good thing. And on more like a personal note, I was able to spend a good amount of time with my son, my grown-up son, was able to go with me to the Amazon for a visit for a few weeks, and then in Europe as well, right? And that spending time with your kid is always a good thing. Thank you.
Sounds lovely. Yes. I'm still thinking about France. I'll be thinking about France all weekend. Tamar, what additional positive outcomes came outside of the products that we tend to focus on? You've mentioned reconnecting. Anything else?
So for me, I would say something positive that came up was that that other faculty in my department at the time had to teach classes that normally I would have to teach. I think it was good for the community to kind of diversify, and for the student to diversify. Yeah.
So now your colleagues are prepared to cover and take on those courses, whereas before they weren't necessarily, right?
Right. And I should say that we also hired more people, but yeah, that was, I think that was good for us to kind of think a little bit out of the box of who's going to teach what and when.
Yeah, we kind of get stuck in certain patterns. Helen, anything else that comes to mind as a positive outcome?
I mean, I think for me, it was time, like quality time spent with my partner more, being able to take time for myself. I actually started to learn Spanish. I just decided to take a class in something that's completely unrelated to what I do, right? And I kind of miss it actually. When I got to the fall semester, I thought I was going to be able to keep doing a little bit of that every day, and then that soon got wiped out by other things. But yes, so taking time to do something unrelated to your academic life and reconnect with hobbies or reconnect with people, I think is really important.
Yeah, very good. All right, one last question, and this one is specifically for Hannah. So we've been spending time talking about sabbatical leave, but apart from sabbaticals, I know there are some funding opportunities that provide course release time or support for undergraduate or graduate students. Student support can be an additional way to make progress. Hannah, can you tell us about some of these opportunities?
Sure, thank you, Barbara. One of the programs I would really like to highlight is that in partnership with Advance, the Office of the Vice President for Research launched the We Are One Faculty Success Program as a way to support main campus faculty to spend more time on research and scholarship, especially in this pandemic era. And so this program offers a number of different competitive programs or opportunities to faculty through things like summer research funding with our SURF program. There are course releases or student support that can be provided through our FAST program, or there are even research instrumentation opportunities through a program called PERC, the Program for Enhancing Research Capacity. And so I would strongly encourage you to check out the We Are One website, which I'll post in the chat in just a moment. But you can also stay updated on these kinds of opportunities by signing up for the PI listserv if you haven't done that already. And you can do that through FRDO's website, and I'll be sure to include that as well. But those are just a few things that I wanted to highlight.
Excellent. All right, so what we will do next is I'm going to ask Sandy to share her screen with a few PowerPoint slides that outline the structure, some key points with respect to the application process for sabbatical leave. So I want to call your attention to the sabbatical leave article in the collective bargaining agreement that we have with UAUNM. All faculty, continuing faculty on main campus, that includes tenure track, and lectures, are represented by UAUNM. Although we're not speaking about academic leave today, lectures have academic leave benefit as well. We'll focus on sabbatical leave, which is detailed in Article 11. Next slide. So at the bargaining table, when we were negotiating the contract, we really approached the sabbatical leave article with the idea of it being a collaborative, collegial, and shared decision-making process with the faculty member's colleagues, and the department chair. So as you've heard today's perspectives from our faculty colleagues, there are a variety of options in terms of timeline, time span for sabbatical leave. For example, here are some of the options. If you have had 6 years of continuous full-time service, you can take a full semester-long sabbatical with 100% of your salary intact. If you have had 6 years of continuous service, you can take a year-long sabbatical at 67% of your salary. Now, you can supplement that salary, the 67%, with the additional component from external funding opportunities like the ones that Rosa described for us. Some of you may not know that with 3 years of continuous service, you are eligible for a semester-long sabbatical, but in this case, you receive 67% of your salary. So there are a variety of options here. All right, so the sabbatical leave benefit has an application process attached to it. The application includes a statement of planned activities. And as you've gathered from today's conversation, We don't want you to stress out about the statement of planned activities. We want for you to think about how it fits your overall research program, your scholarly or creative works program, but don't put a whole lot of burden and stress on yourself to think that if I place this all on my application, I have to accomplish everything here. That's not the case, but it does provide you a really good plan for the years ahead. So there's a statement of planned activities. There's an application form itself, and you can find that on the Office for Academic Personnel's website. I want to make sure that I state that we are currently revising our forms so that they are in perfect alignment with the collective bargaining agreement. If you go to the website today, you're going to find the old sabbatical leave form on there. So come visit us in a couple of weeks, get onto that website and select the resources tab, pull down on forms, and we will have our newly revised sabbatical leave form that is perfectly aligned with the requirements outlined in the collective bargaining agreement. So you have the statement, you have the application form, we request an updated CV, and we request a description of your current teaching, scholarly, creative works, research activities, and service activities. In this description, we also are asking department chairs to tell us how they plan to cover your teaching assignments in particular. So it's a simple application process, simple set of documents that you need to gather. Next. There are some deadlines that I'd like to call your attention to, and these deadlines correspond with the deadline by which these materials need to make it to the provost's office. So there are deadlines that lead up to the deadlines here that are within the school, college, and your own department. So if you're planning a fall sabbatical, we just had the February 1st deadline for fall 2022 sabbatical leave applications. Spring sabbaticals, those materials need to make it to this office by October 1st. For those faculty who are looking at an academic year-long sabbatical, that is fall, spring, that deadline is February 1st. Now, we do have 12-month faculty in the College of University Libraries who are on 12-month contracts, and they are eligible for calendar year sabbaticals. And those calendar year sabbaticals run from January through December, those 12-month faculty. For them, that deadline is October 1st. In the spirit of collegiality and collaboration and shared decision-making, one important set of details that I'd like to call your attention to that are outlined in the article are the priorities for sabbatical leave applications. So the priorities for faculty who are submitting requests for sabbatical. Sometimes we have a department where there are lots of faculty who want to take a sabbatical at the very same semester. Well, we're asking department chairs to prioritize these applications and give priority to faculty who have never been on sabbatical leave. Then prioritize faculty with the greatest number of years since their last sabbatical. Now, sometimes in our small departments, it does present some constraints. So when it's not possible to approve a sabbatical leave application in small departments, and we need to postpone that sabbatical leave, we don't want to penalize the faculty member. Therefore, that period of postponement is credited toward the eligibility for a subsequent sabbatical leave. So you don't lose time. If I can't take a sabbatical for 2 years, that time is credited for my next earning period for a sabbatical leave. So I think a really good outcome on sabbatical leave to help faculty take time to focus on their work and other connections. All right. I think is that all I had? Yeah. All right. So we will, Julia, we will entertain some questions.
Yeah, please think about questions while you're thinking about questions you might have. I want to circle back to the whole idea of part of the charm of a sabbatical being the time to, reconnect and recharge. This is really important. There are studies that show that what most people do with their first sabbatical after getting tenure and promotion to associate professor is recover from getting tenure. If you think about it, this makes sense because in some ways you've been working towards tenure since you started grad school. If you wanted to be a faculty member at some point during grad school, then you had grad school, you made a PhD, so you've been working towards this for a long time. It should take time to recover and to rethink. So it's not just the advice from our outstanding panelists. This is realistic, and it's incorporate that into your thinking, and it may help you be more creative about how you think about the time, particularly if due to family constraints, ongoing travel concerns due to the pandemic, you feel like you might be having a sabbatical here, then give yourself some flexibility in terms of how you think about the goals. And please ask questions. Yan, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks everybody for the great presentations and great panel. So my name is Yan Ling, and I'm a assistant professor from geography in environmental studies. So I have a question about the deadlines and because I submitted my dossier last fall. So if I were to apply for the fall 2022, it looks like I'm already late, right? I already missed the deadline. So my question is, so are we eligible for January through December, even though we are on 9-month contract?
January through December for a whole calendar year?
Or it has
So
to be semester by semester, like we apply for one semester and then apply for another semester?
I think, yes, what you can do is submit one application for a year-long sabbatical that would take you to spring 2023 and fall 2023. You don't need to submit separate applications. Just one
Okay.
application, and that would be due on that October deadline.
Okay, that makes
So
sense. Thank you.
Yeah,
Just
so
to
as soon as
clarify
you
that.
get your great news on tenure, then you can start pulling together the materials for your sabbatical.
Great, thank you.
I want to say on behalf of someone else that a lot of time not taking it exactly, I grabbed it the first minute, I was eligible. But I have colleagues that waited and planned it. And I think that's a really excellent way to do it as well. So.
Maybe I'll ask another question. Thanks, Tamara. So what is the expectation from the university in general about the sabbatical? And I'm sorry, I missed the first several minutes. Julia knows I forgot to register for this, and then I had to ask Julia for the Zoom link. But I mean, what is the general expectations from the university?
I think the general expectations from the university is that you take some time to reflect, to focus your energy on certain particular projects that are in your line of research. And I think we heard today some really compelling stories that our expectation is that our faculty deserve this time to sit back, reflect, reconnect, explore other opportunities, travel, make connections with community that then serve you really well for the coming years as a tenured faculty member. I don't think we're communicating today that we expect you to tick off everything that you promised us to do upon your return. What I will say is that when you receive sabbatical leave, you are also acknowledging that you promised the university to come back for at least a year's time in exchange for that sabbatical leave. But again, when I read those reports that faculty submit, I read them with the most positive lens possible. And I don't go back to the original application materials and say, well, what happened to that publication? I say, congratulations, despite COVID, you made excellent progress, and this sounds like really interesting work. So I think that's our expectation. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Great question.
I want to comment something. I had the same question about what are the expectations, what I'm supposed to model my application, right? Too. So I asked the wrong person for their previous application. And I should have asked somebody more like me, and I asked an overachiever. And I saw at least a project. Oh my God, that's how I ended up with so many projects. So that's another thing to consider. Maybe you wanna ask for, samples of the diverse group of colleagues so that you have your own, a sense what kinds of things could be, interesting from your own perspective. But that's something that I learned my lesson. Look at for a few samples too. Yeah.
Great suggestion, Rosa.
Absolutely. So someone has sent me a question. So how do administrative roles affect building up time for the next sabbatical? And how does consideration of administrative roles relate to future sabbaticals? So I'll answer the first question, which is easy, which is you're still a faculty member. So if you're a part-time assistant or associate dean or special assistant or department chair, center director, it's still, you've been here 6 years. So you're still building up time. So the time accumulates the same way. I think there's a more nuanced, how does consideration of administration roles relate to future sabbaticals? If you take an administrative role where there's no one else to do the job, then your sabbatical's delayed. What do you think, Barbara?
Well, you're asking the wrong person, because in my 20 plus years as a faculty member, I have not taken a sabbatical. Shame on me, but I'm not going to retire without taking one. So yes, Jessica, oh my gosh. Camilla?
Hi, it's Kamala. That's okay.
Kamala.
Thank you guys so much. This has been interesting, scary. It opens up possibilities. And I just wondered if people could talk about how creative ways that people have managed. Even so, my daughters get ready for college, so I feel like I have more room to move maybe and go somewhere else. But then my husband works at the VA, and so I just wondered if people had creative ways around maintaining those kinds of family relationships.
Let our faculty colleagues chime in on this one, our excellent panelists. Julia, if you have anything as well.
I'm looking at a couple things in chat. I think it's got to be different for everyone, is the unhelpful answer. But I know people with family ties who, under better travel conditions, have been able to go somewhere for a couple of weeks, or have a collaboration where they travel for several times during the semester or the semester plus summer, however you think about it, but it's for shorter periods. And it could even be, and I know people who've done things like go somewhere by themselves for a week at a time, find a B&B in Taos or something to go to write away from their family, but with small chunks of time long enough to make progress, but not so long that your family feels neglected. I don't know if Tamar maybe has some other ideas.
Yeah, no, actually I have to share that this also gives me ideas. So I think flexibility is really the name of the game, right? Whether that has been your career anyways, you're flexible or not, the sabbatical is your time. Barbara already told you that she's not going to penalize you. So just really find what works best for you. You wouldn't be eligible for sabbatical if you were not extremely motivated, right? And working hard, because that's the reality of it. So I think that should be your time to find what works best for you given your circumstances. It is still my dream to do what Rosa did, but I think we'll all at least save the links, right, for these universities. But in the end, it's like wherever you are with your life, right? It doesn't have to be family, it's anything. And it could be service too. I would say that for me, I did have a contract at the time, and I did continue to work on it. And I probably in retrospect should have paid myself, because I did the year, right? So I probably should have paid myself the 33% that I didn't. And I truly just didn't think about it. So I think having a panel like that is just priceless.
So we've got a couple of related questions here. So one is sort of the front end, one at the back end of promotion to professor. So did anyone use their sabbatical to think about developing a promotion plan? And then the other piece here is, can we submit a promotion to professor while on sabbatical? So Barbara, if you could answer the second one while people are thinking about if they have responses to the first one.
Yes, there's nothing that precludes a faculty member from submitting a dossier while they're on sabbatical leave for promotion to full. No reason that you can't do that, provided you meet all of the timelines that are associated with the submission of that dossier. Yeah, I don't see any reason why not.
You might not want to, but I would say about the strategy, every department is different. For us, we're a really flexible department. I didn't have a specific strategy either to get my tenure or to get to full. I just do the research that I like, and I just push myself to publish it, and that's my strategy. I don't have any secret strategy.
Advance will have a workshop later this semester on promotion planning. So we'll have some people talking about that.
I suppose, well, just quickly, I suppose
Yeah.
I kind of did that without knowing, planning a little bit more like my long-term, research, how it's, was shifting and expanding. And also because I didn't took my sabbatical right after promotion. I took 1 year after. And so maybe that also helped me to plan and apply for these grants now that I think about it. Because when you're preparing your dossier, you're extremely busy preparing your dossier, right, for promotion. So I didn't took my sabbatical. I waited 1 more year. So then, yeah, in a sense, I spent some of my sabbatical time working on projects that will, take longer and probably, hopefully, help me get to full someday.
One of the important things to think about as part of being promoted to associate professor is you can take more risk, both in the classroom and with your research or with collaborations. You can start things, you can work on the projects that you weren't sure were going to work out, and when you wanted to make sure things were going to work, so you get the publications you need for tenure, so you can take more risk. And the sabbatical can be a good time to think about what those look like, or what sort of new collaborations do you want, which can then feed into sort of developing a promotion plan. There's a couple of questions about grants. So, no, the grants don't go on sabbatical, unfortunately. But you can go on sabbatical. You can get help from the Faculty Research Development Office and Faculty Research Support Officers in terms of thinking about how to manage your grant and whether or not it's allowable for you to use any of your grant support for your sabbatical funding. PIs take all kinds of different approaches to how they manage this. Helen kept meeting with her students. Some people meet with their students less frequently. People that are fortunate enough to have a postdoc may give the postdoc or senior grad students more responsibility. People take wildly different approaches to it. And so it really ends up being you having a hard conversation with yourself about how can you keep things moving forward and have a bit of a break. And that really depends very much on the type of funding you have, what sort of deadlines you're coming up against. And that's the sort of thing that could enter into how you think about your sabbatical timing. Have we missed any questions in the chat?
Looks like you've covered them.
Oh, Jessica, why not? Just because you might, it's a lot of work. Yes.
I just want to say, so when I took my sabbatical after my promotion to associate, I actually was able to take a year because I was able to reconfigure a little bit of the money in one of the grants I had at the time to help me sort of take that year. And so it's worth thinking about if you're putting in grant proposals and you have a sabbatical on the horizon, thinking about planning for that when you're actually submitting your grant proposal, and thinking of strategically about how you might build in a little bit of money. So either you can go someplace if that you have the ability to do that, or that you can take the year when you might have only been able to take the semester or something. So it's worth planning ahead for those things. Yeah.
Mhm.
Lisa has a great question.
Are there certain department or college activities or decisions you recommend staying involved in and attending meetings even if on sabbatical? No.
Correct.
This should be one of the things you most appreciate, is you don't have to go to the meetings. If the department's doing something you care about passionately, maybe, but for the routine stuff, no. This is your chance to take a step away and, you know, come back maybe with some new ideas.
And
Great
don't feel
question.
badly about it.
Yeah.
And do not feel badly about it.
That is a really important question. I'm going to have to make sure we include that in future panels.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best take home lesson. I think.
That's right.
Don't do it.
So I had an expanded question about grants. If you're kind of already stretched for effort and you have, 2 course buyouts and your summer is funded too, what do you do about all of that? Or do you talk to your faculty support and they help you manage that?
Yeah, I would talk to your chair and get some advice from the faculty research support officer in terms of how you manage that, and maybe rebudget some of that. I mean, certainly you can use the summer funding right while you're on sabbatical because you want to be paid, assuming you're going to keep doing the grant activities.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks very much to Barbara and Hannah and Rosa and Helen and Tamar for taking the time. Thank all of you for being here. Please get in touch with any of us if you have questions, and have a good Friday and a good weekend.
And stay warm, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.